Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special. I'm Shireen Bhan. As the UPA completes 3 years in power, the economy is floundering. Every parameter is looking bad, whether it's inflation, with food inflation back in double digits, it's the rupee breaching the psychological level of 55, it's the GDP number, which all non-government agencies now seem to peg between 6 to 7% for FY13. It's the fiscal deficit, it's the current account deficit, it's the governance deficit. Things are looking bad for India. To talk about how we can get out of this current mess, how we can break this downward spiral, I've got with me stalwarts of India Inc. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining me here. We're of course coming to you from the Confederation of Indian Industry. Adi Godrej, let me start by asking you, about a month ago we had a similar conversation, and at that point in time you spoke to me about how perhaps India Inc. was guilty of talking down the economy and how perhaps the reality was not as bad as the perception. Would you like to change your mind now? Do you think that reality is as bad as perception?
No, the perception has become worse over the last 1 month. I think some of the steps taken in the budget, for example, particularly retrospective amendments, have not gone down well, especially with international investors and to a certain extent with Indian investors. On top of it, we've had a major depreciation of the rupee. The rupee has been allowed to fall tremendously. And then the industrial production numbers, inflation numbers have not been favorable. However, I strongly believe that we need to concentrate on restoring growth, on reviving growth, and get onto the reform program. But
are you seeing any indications or signs that the government is willing to even attempt to do that, or are they already in election mode?
The point is, it's eminently possible. So, for example, you can cut down subsidies.
Sure.
They've announced that they want to contain subsidies to 2% of GDP.
But there's no roadmap for how.
Okay, so the parliament is just ended. Last time they made a mistake announcing some reform during parliament.
So you think that over the next 24 to 48 hours we may see a fuel price hike?
CII will be working hard at that, and I do hope the government will respond, because it will be good for them politically, it will be good for them electorally. So if the reform process starts, so there are several things they could announce. FDI in multi-brand retail, for example.
You think they're going to attempt it a second time around?
Well, you can leave it to the states to decide, and then nobody can object. You can bring subsidies down, which will help contain the fiscal deficit. RBI, to my mind, needs to be very clear that they should announce that they will defend the rupee. When they made the mistake some months ago, around August, September, that they won't defend the rupee crashed.
But by all accounts, at this point in time, the Reserve Bank is saying it's constrained. It has limited options.
Why is it constrained? We've got almost $300 billion of reserves. It's not constrained. Secondly, what you say doesn't have to be exactly what you do. But you don't send a message to the world that you're not going to defend the rupee, you're going to let the rupee work its own numbers. You get every speculator and their aunt come and play in the market.
You're blaming the Reserve Bank for the current situation as far as the
Reserve Bank should be
concerned?
more clear that they will intervene in the rupee not to depreciate very rapidly.
Okay, Mr. Munjal, I want to ask you, because while Mr. Godrej is talking about what the Reserve Bank should do as far as the rupee is concerned, and let's just talk about the rupee, because the Reserve Bank is saying, hey, I need you guys to do something in Delhi as well. There's been silence from the government on how it plans to manage the rupee, if it wants to manage the rupee at all.
Well, the Reserve Bank, actually, you're right, is almost on record having said that we are doing, even when they were raising interest rates, month after month, they said we are using monetary tools because that's all we have available. So if fiscal policy is used more effectively, it's likely that the role of Reserve Bank can then be lessened, or they can step back to that extent. But it is a concern at this time.
It is a concern. Rahul Bajaj, we're talking about the UPA celebrating its 3 years in office today. There's really no cause for celebration at this point in time. On all accounts, and this is a poll that's been conducted by Network 18, most respondents don't want the UPA to come back to power. They in fact want the Prime Minister to be replaced. If a non-UPA government were to come back into power, they prefer Narendra Modi to come in as the Prime Minister, which I believe corporate India would like to see happen as well. But just as far as the economic performance in this government is concerned, the situation at this point in time seems to be perceived as this government not being in control. Is that how you see it?
See, 3-4 points, keeping in mind what my colleagues have already said. I feel bad for the current situation because the major India story is good. I don't want to go into all the reasons and the facts. I think everybody is aware of it. Large market, demographic dividend, good savings rate, a little bit going down, but good savings rate. Various things. India is a great country and a great potential. That's why for the last few years we were doing very well, and we will do, I believe, well in the longer run. But in such a great situation, you had two problems. One, imported prices increasing, oil and some other commodities, but let's say basically oil, we have to import 70% or more of our requirements. So that is beyond the control of the government. Secondly, and I don't say that as an apology for the government, the fractured mandate given in 2009.
Yeah.
Not that 2004 was much better, but I won't go into details, I don't have enough time. So there is a fractured mandate. But having said this, come on, your allies don't accept what you say. You don't reach out enough to the opposition. Forget the BJP. I think you should reach out to BJP, and each says the other is not reaching out. They're both behaving like children. I've said that often enough on TV before.
Right.
But what about the other opposition parties? I mean, it's a standstill. Whether it's a diarchy of the Congress president on the one hand and the Prime Minister on the other hand, or whether even if that is not the reason, which some people say is part of the reason, but no decisions are being taken. They'll have an 80-page report now on the 3 years of economy and say this was done, this was done. But the most of it will be justifications and excuses why it was not done.
Sure.
You talked of the rupee depreciating.
No, I want to bring up that point of coalition dharma that you talked about, and how coalition dharma is actually weighed on this government as far.
Coalition dharma. I didn't justify it. I said,
I'm not saying you justified it. I'm not saying you justified it. But I'm saying let's make a distinction between executive decisions and legislative decisions. Legislation, whether it's the companies bill, which of course corporate India has had plenty to do with not allowing it to go to parliament, but that apart, whether it's the land bill, the only bill that's actually made it to parliament is the microfinance bill. But executive decisions, FDI and executive decision, they could have done it without taking parliament into consideration.
Environment. Right, now land, but you see, even if it doesn't require passing, my colleague said that, but please understand, if you do something which say a Mamta, or if at all, I don't think DMK can do much, they have nowhere else to go. They will not go into the lap of Jayalalitha. But Mamta is a problem, and if you don't have Mayawati and Samajwadi supporting you, then you see if you do things which they don't agree with, even if it doesn't require parliamentary approval, you don't have a majority in Rajya Sabha, but even if it doesn't require that, on other matters they'll defeat you. So you cannot go against, whether it's a, I heard Adi say that, but, and we have all talked about it, but if it doesn't require parliamentary approval, it does not mean you can go ahead and do it after annoying everybody around you. Because other things, they will not vote with you. So you have to carry people with you.
Okay.
Yes, where a parliamentary approval is not required, it may be a little easier. But the other thing I want to point out, everybody is saying rupee depreciation, what should be done? Please don't treat the symptoms. You can somewhat reduce volatility maybe by your actions selling dollars or whatever.
Address the cause. Address the cause of the problem.
You have to go to the cause.
Yeah.
You have to increase exports. You have to bring in investment, etc. Those things we don't have time to go into. Those are required.
Sure.
If exports won't take place and imports keep taking place, etc., etc., the rupee will keep depreciating.
I got your point.
There is not even $200 billion is not enough with the Reserve Bank of India to do anything about it.
I got your point. So I'm going to put that question now to Rakesh Mittal. We're talking about inviting or attracting capital flows into this country. There seems to be a big disconnect because the finance minister stands up in parliament and says we want foreign direct investment. At the same time, as Mr. Godrej pointed out, you bring in a retrospective amendment. You've got people across the world, global organizations, global industry bodies writing into you saying this is not a good idea, and yet you decide to go ahead with it. What does this tell you about the mindset of this government, the mindset specifically of the finance ministry?
You know, I think clearly, I mean, these are the issues which are engaging everyone within the country as well as overseas, and I think the finance minister is the best person to really answer your question. But having said that, let me also say, you know, we just talked about the monetary piece of bringing down inflation or looking at the rupee depreciation. I mean, to my mind, all along, the Reserve Bank of India kept raising interest rates and the inflation kept on going.
What is it supposed to do? You're back at inflation at double digit. What is it supposed to do?
No, but that is where I'm saying today there is even more serious note of looking at FDI in multi-brand retail, because we are only looking at...
That's what the Reserve Bank is saying, that you've got to help me out in this situation. Delhi seems to be doing absolutely nothing.
No, but that's exactly, see, on one hand, we are feeding 1/6 of the world's population. We are actually tracking food security in the world. I mean, that's one part of it. But the second is, in spite of all the incentives, no serious investment is coming in supply chain. To my mind, the government is only looking at foreign direct investment coming, just the color of money which is coming into the multi-brand retail. But to my mind, when you look at spurious products, milk, vegetables, fruits, the consumer is being taken for a ride.
Let's hope they move on that front. And to my mind, confident that they will probably move on retail. They will. You believe so?
I also believe that, because if we don't move now, when do we move?
So Mr. Munjal, you're saying something very important. You agree with Mr. Godrej that they are going to move both on FDI and retail as well as civil aviation?
I think certainly on FDI and retail, they will allow the states to make their own decision, and which will actually... That
was part of the earlier policy. States were given the option of either adhering to the Central Act or not.
My feeling is it will happen now.
Okay.
I'm not sure about the airlines yet.
You're not sure about the airlines yet?
I'm not sure about the aviation sector.
Okay.
Although it is actually crying out for investment right now. So maybe we should be proactive and move ahead on that as well. Because we have to see what is our interest as India. I think some of these things we need to make a call on and just make the decision and go ahead. And I'm reasonably sure, having made some of the decisions, they would be able to carry along both the opposition and their allies, which has been the big challenge today.
I'm looking at report after report. Citi says we're suffering from a quadruplet deficit. CLSA says we're back to a 1991 type situation, and this time perhaps it's going to be much worse for us to bounce back from that situation. The rupee has devalued more than it actually did in 1991. Is there a sense of denial once again as far as this government is concerned when it comes to economic policy and what needs to be done at this point in time?
I'm not sure there's denial, which is if you look at how many bills are pending in Parliament right now, or with groups of ministers or expert groups, it's clear that there is an attempt to bring some of these things forward and get them implemented. The inability of the entire system to communicate with each other, which is a government with opposition, government with allies. So there's a communication breakdown. I clearly think it's communication which is causing this, and which goes back to the state of politics of the day.
But let me also add, you just mentioned 1991. The timing is absolutely different. Today the world is not growing, so that is a serious concern. Therefore, we need to look at investments coming into the country and domestic consumption going up. And that is where I think we need to look at investments and generation of employability, because that's the entire landscape. And to my mind, government still has 2 years. I mean, it's not a very small window. So there is a lot which can be done.
But unfortunately, it seems to already be stuck in election mode. It's only talking about the politics of entitlement and the economics of entitlement.
It's absurd to compare the present situation to 91. We had 2 weeks of foreign exchange reserve. We were going bankrupt. We had mortgaged our gold. Today we have 6 months of foreign exchange imports of foreign exchange reserve, and we have tools in our hand today. In 91, we had to change things dramatically, which fortunately was done. And we have tools in our hand. In 2008, when the global economy tanked, we brought in very good fiscal stimuli, monetary stimuli, and we were one of the best recovering country from that stagnation. This was done by this government. Part of it was done by this government. And I think the tools are there. We must encourage the government to apply these tools, get things done.
How much encouragement do they need?
It's a question of goading. It's a question of prodding, and we must tell them to get over their inertia. And
so should we blame industry for not goading and prodding the government on?
No, we have been doing it. There are political issues. There are problems, and the signs I see, the announcements I see, the decisions I see coming, I'm hopeful that over the next couple of months we'll see some reform.
Mr. Bajaj, Prakash, let me come to you now, because you were talking about the long-term India story, and nobody is disputing the long-term India story. It's the short and the medium term that we actually have a problem. If you look at what S&P is saying, or you look at what Fitch probably will say, the Finance Ministry is making its sales pitch to the ratings agency, but yet S&P has actually revised our rating outlook downwards, and there is a serious problem if Fitch goes ahead and does that and follows what S&P did. So, we do have a challenge on our hands, and there doesn't seem to be any credible fiscal consolidation roadmap that this government has put forward.
You see, as far as I'm concerned, for this situation, we can talk long-term, medium-term, or short-term, irrespective of how you define long-term, medium-term, short-term. And S&P or otherwise, I'm talking of 2014 May elections, or maybe a midterm. I don't know. Everybody's today saying no, there will not be a midterm, because parliament members don't want it. Many of the opposition parties don't want it.
Yeah.
Story goes that Mamta and Mulayam Singh wanted because they had good victories, but I don't know that position. The question is, any self-respecting government, we have had these discussions for the last 12 months. Editorials have been written by top papers and top journalists, but nobody cares. The government, those things which I said they are afraid of, where you don't require parliamentary approval, whether it's multi-brand retail, etc., go ahead and do it.
No, so Mr. Bajaj, if you're saying the government doesn't care, what do you think is making this government not care? You've got voters saying that they don't want to vote you back in power. You've got an economy that is floundering.
I don't know about what the voter is saying. Because BJP is not taking advantage. BJP is not in a position to take advantage. So I'm not so sure. I've seen the surveys in various magazines. Sure. I'm not sure who will win. Depends on why it falls, when does the government fall, how does the election take place.
Right.
The danger only is you may get another fractured verdict.
Right.
Fine. But how long can we go on like this? Let's do the right thing. If the government falls for doing the right thing now, so they have to decide what is the right thing. Don't go to an extreme situation by passing some laws where the people won't like. But if you do the right things, they will support you. Definitely in Lok Sabha, you will have the majority. But I don't know about the Rajya Sabha. Try and get BJP on board. Otherwise, bring in even a company's bill once you are ready for it. And once the standing committee again sends it back to you. And then if it is defeated, money bill defeat is a different matter. You have to resign. Otherwise, Rajya Sabha, another bill being defeated, you don't have to resign. It's embarrassment. But even if you resign on the right reason, and let's have elections.
All right, got that point. I'm going to come to you for wrap-up comments. But CV, let me get you in on this, because you parlay with people in power in Delhi. What's your own sense about whether they are interested in breaking the logjam or not?
No, I think there is interest in breaking the logjam. There is no doubt about that. But I think where we have been, where things were held up was in implementation. There was always an intent, but we saw that there was a national.
Are we going to see execution reform?
I think what we need to do is to receive a much more partnership. What we saw in 2008, post 2008, was a lot of partnership between industry and government in trying to really look at in a war footing as to what things need to be brought in. I think that's what we are going to see in the next few months to come, and that's what I see is the hope, that government and industry would need to work together to see where interventions need to come, how implementations can be done. That's
again, I'm sorry I sound a skeptic, but you've had meetings with the Prime Minister, you've had meetings with the Finance Minister, you've had meetings with the Commerce Minister, and yet we're talking about the exact same issues that were brought up at those meetings last year. The Board of Trade met, we talked about the same sort of stuff, and we're still having the same discussion. But I don't want to get into that. Mr. Mujal, I want to ask all of you for wrap-up comments now. In terms of the 3-year anniversary that we're celebrating, for the lack of a better word, today, or the UPA is celebrating today, how would you sum up the economic performance? Are you disappointed? Are you frustrated? Are you angry? How would you sum it up?
There are two aspects. I think one, we need to recognize that we are doing much better than the rest of the world. So we must not just berate everything just for the sake of it. It's also become a bit fashionable nowadays, by the way. So we have to be a little bit balanced around this. There is some good going on in India still, and by the way, some good decisions have been made as well. But we've just not done enough. We've not done enough to tap our real potential. There is headroom for growth here. And that's what is disappointing.
Okay.
We are not reaching out and making those decisions which will allow the industry to go out and tap that headroom.
Okay. Disappointed Sunil Munjal, Rakesh Mittal.
I think I'll concur with Sunil. I mean, growing at 6.5% is not all that bad, and so clearly we shouldn't say that nothing has happened. Having said that, the focus has been more on social inclusiveness. I wish that the government now starts moving towards the development side, development agenda, and clearly to my mind, private sector needs to be involved more and more, directly or through PPPs in various fields, where government resources need to be utilized in an efficient manner, delivered well.
They'll make you pay for it through the auction route, sir.
Well, I mean, that's a different thing. But what I'm trying to say here is that it is important that we start looking at the development, we start looking at investments, we start looking at consumption going up and employability moving.
You're a candid man. You talk straight, Mr. Godrej. Are you beyond disappointed with what's happened?
No, I'm disappointed that we haven't reformed fast enough. But I feel that there is tremendous opportunity. I think the opportunity to get back to a 9% growth rate is strong. I do hope some of the reforms are announced soon. Subsidies should be cut. Some of the FDI reforms should be announced. And I do hope that within the next 12 months, we pass the goods and services tax, because that would provide the very strong fiscal stimulus for growth. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the year 13-14, we start growing at 9% again.
Okay, Rahul.
Also, we hope they don't pass a DTC and the land bill as they're currently designed.
Okay.
Both are big concerns.
Jairam Ramesh, now, by the way, very happy saying you're opposing the Standing Committee's report, and now you feel that his bill was actually better than what the Standing Committee has put out. But Rahul Bajaj, final words with you. Are you feeling reassured, remotely optimistic that things are going to change, or do you believe that we're in a situation where we've already done a bunch of self-goals and the self-goals will continue?
It's not a question of supporting for the sake of supporting. Many people do that. They are chamchas. And neither is the question of opposing for the sake of opposing. I think, as Sunil said, that's becoming fashionable. Not for industrialists, it's for others. The opposition people and academics, they can do that. We try to talk facts. Things are not good. They could be worse. That's not a consolation. 6.5% is not good.
Yeah.
They have $40,000 per capita income. Mine is $1,500 per capita income. Unless I grow at 9%, I can't catch up. I don't want them to come down, and they won't come down, by and large. I have to go up. So we have to have a higher growth rate. Everybody knows what has to be done. And the implementation. All the corruption, inefficiency in our social programs. And that's what I think others said. And that's creating a fiscal deficit. Nobody wants that we should not be inclusive. We have to be inclusive. Growth has to be inclusive, as Mr. Mittal, as Rakesh said. But with efficiency and less corruption, why don't you remove the discretion that's been talked about? Sonia ji talked about it over a year ago. In mines and minerals and real estate, to have a proper auction. I'm not saying only auction. I'm not going to technical details, what Supreme Court or otherwise.
I want in 5 seconds wrap-up comments from you, sir, on the economic performance.
From me?
Yes.
From me, that I would say overall, it could be worse, which is no consolation. I am disappointed at what has happened vis-a-vis politics and economics in the last 3 years under UPA 2.
All right, gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here to discuss the government's economic performance. Hopefully, we will perhaps see some of those initiatives that we've spoken about, but we've spoken about them ad nauseum. Hopefully, the logjam will end. Appreciate you joining us here on the CNBC TV 18 special. From all of us here, goodbye and many thanks for watching.